was feeling about a half past dead. I just need some place where I could lay my head. Hey, mister, can you tell me where a man might find a bed?
Hello everyone, welcome to the Take Care Man channel. My name is Todd. In this video, as you saw from the intro, we're using the Weight shaving soap from First Line Shaving out of St. Louis. We'll also have the matching splash to use with that. And we're using the AP Shaveco U-Brush with a 2-bed knot. The U-Brush is the system that you can get a black or like cream colored handle. You can get either a red or blue ferrule, and then a choice of any of the 24 millimeter knots that AP Shaveco sells. For our razor, we're using the Goodfellows Smile Shibumi Shavette, Commissary Shavette. Takes a half DE blade. Let me try to show you what this looks like on the inside. I don't know how well you can see the notches there. See these little ridges that are right here? As you push those, the holder for the blade slides outward. And let me flip it around here. And you can see how the half DE blade sits in there. See what that looks like? To get this to go in well, what you have to kind of do is you have to kind of put a fingernail back here on the back side and kind of pry this open. It's not hinged like you would see on like the Feather SS or DX. And so then you have to kind of slide it in here like this. If you don't sort of open it up in the back, like with a fingernail, then it tends to push the blade off of the holder, and it ends up just, not working well. In this video, we're going to talk about the theme behind the Weight soap, and that theme is PTSD. Now, Michael, who is a first responder himself in the St. Louis area, is the artisan there at First Line Shave, and he notes that this soap is intended to be a project not just to honor first responders and military, but anyone who suffers from PTSD. And I'm going to expand that a little bit and even talk about two different types of PTSD. There's PTSD, sort of the normal PTSD, which we call uncomplicated PTSD, which doesn't mean it's not difficult, it means it's easier to treat. And then there's complex PTSD. And people who are not in the military or LEOs or other types of first responders would be more likely to have the complex PTSD. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into the shave. But being that this is the Take Care Man channel, and I care a lot about men's mental health and mental health in general, and I'm a mental health professional. I'm a professor of social work, have a PhD in social work, was a former director of a community mental health center. This issue is very important to me, and on a personal level, someone I'm very, very close to was recently, like within the last couple of weeks, diagnosed with complex PTSD. So this is a very important issue to me, and I'm glad to have an opportunity and a venue to sort of talk about it, and this soap sort of facilitates being able to talk about it. So let's talk about the soap first, the notes on the soap. So this soap has notes of tobacco and whiskey and gunpowder, vanilla sugar, rose, and patchouli, saffron, white musk, pink pepper, and jasmine. And this is in the First Line Shave 3.0 soap base. There's what the soap looks like. And we're going to dip the AP Shaveco 2-bed knot here in our water. We're going to go in here and load the brush. Now, when this soap first released, I sort of missed the drop on it initially. And when I went to First Line Shave to get a set, they were already sold out. And I saw Shave 326 Ken did a video, and I was like, I hate I missed this soap. It's it's kind of on brand for me to have an opportunity to talk about mental health. And I watched Chris's video, IMCDB, and entered his contest for the giveaway, but I thought there's no chance I'm going to win it. And then Ken let me know that the Razor Company had a set. And so I went and purchased a set from the Razor Company. However, before that set could arrive, I actually won Chris's giveaway over at IMCDB. And so this is the set he sent me where he scooped out. I have a set here that's not been touched, not been used, and I'm going to give that away as my 500 subscriber giveaway. So if you'll just comment below and say I'm in, then I will consider you for the giveaway and do a random drawing for that in an upcoming shave. And I'll repeat that again at the end of our shave. So I'm loading the brush here. It's got it pretty good and loaded. A lot of proto lather there. Let me kind kind of dip the tips here a little bit, and let's go in here and start building a lather. Now, obviously, the most important word in the acronym that is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is not really even the disorder part, because a lot of people don't like to think of it as a disorder, but instead sort of a pattern of thinking and brain activity. But the most important word is a T, trauma, because it recognizes that people who are living with this particular issue have dealt with some type of trauma. And just to talk for a second about some of the prevalence rates for some of the more common trauma issues that people face. Now, before I get into some of this prevalence information, let me say that if you have a past history of abuse and are easily triggered by these kinds of things, or went through some trauma as an LEO or other first responder or military, just be aware that some of what we're going to discuss here could be triggering. Also, if you have children in the room with you, you might want to find a more private way to watch this video, because it's going to contain some content that is going to be of more of an adult nature. So just be aware of that. So to some of those prevalence issues of trauma, 1 in 5 people were sexually molested as a child. 1 in 4 were beaten by a parent to the point of a mark being left on their body. 1 out of 4 grew up with alcoholic relatives. 1 in 3 couples engage in some form of physical violence, so a third. 1 out of 8 have witnessed their mother, when they were children, witnessed their mother being beaten or hit. And 1 out of 6 women and 1 out of 33 men have either been raped or have been the victim of attempted rape. And then in addition to those, there's other traumas that we think about, like traffic accidents or the death of a loved one, traumatic childbirth, a house fire, being bullied as a kid, learning that you have a life-threatening illness, having a miscarriage, or being involved in some sort of accident where you're seriously injured or someone you love is seriously injured. And that's not an exhaustive list, meaning it doesn't include every possible trauma, obviously, but that's some of the major ones. Now, the thing about complex PTSD, it's different from uncomplicated PTSD, in that uncomplicated PTSD usually involves just a single traumatic event or a short period of time of traumatic events where people actually had the ability to escape or do something about their situation. Whereas with complex PTSD, this is more prolonged types of exposure to trauma that results in these symptoms that I'm going to describe here in just a second. So regardless of whether it's complex PTSD or uncomplicated PTSD, let me get a little water into the brush here. Some of the symptoms are very similar, and I could not more highly recommend this book to you here, The Body Keeps the Score. This is an amazing, amazing book written where anyone can understand it. It does have some technical information, but at the same time it has some very useful practical information. It's not a self-help type book. It's a book to really help you understand trauma on a lot of different levels, and I highly recommend it to you. In that book, he describes some of the symptoms of PTSD, and both the complex and uncomplicated type, as the following. The crushing sensation in your chest that you may label as anxiety or depression. The fear of losing control, always being on alert for danger or rejection. The self-loathing, the nightmares and flashbacks, the fog that keeps you from staying on task and from engaging fully in what you are doing, being unable to fully open your heart to another human being. So there he's describing a little bit of what it feels like to live with PTSD. He goes on to say, while we all want to move beyond trauma, the part of our brain that is devoted to ensuring our survival, deep below our rational brain, is not very good at denial. Long after traumatic experience is over, it may be reactivated at the slightest hint of danger and mobilize disturbed brain circuits and secrete massive amounts of stress hormones. This precipitates unpleasant emotions, intense physical sensations, and impulsive and aggressive actions. These post-traumatic reactions feel incomprehensible and overwhelming. Feeling out of control, survivors of trauma often begin to fear that they are damaged to the core and beyond redemption. And what we know from studying children through the ACEs study, and ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, we know that these trauma that children suffer damage parts of their brain like the amygdala and sort of rewire their brain to feel like they're constantly in fight, flight, or freeze mode, like they're in survival mode constantly. And when that happens, particularly at a young age, it sort of changes the structure, literally, and the neurochemistry of your brain. And in the ACEs studies, what we found is children who suffered things like physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, including physical and emotional neglect, and where there were individuals in the house with mental illness, or they had a parent who was incarcerated, or a mother who was treated violently, or a parent who was a substance abuser, or if there was a divorce. These are what we would consider adverse childhood experiences. And a lot of people have those kinds of things happen, but some people have multiple of those, experience multiple traumas like that as a kid. And the more of those that you experience, both in your life, and we listed some of the ones that happen more to adults earlier, but also in your childhood, then the more likely you are to develop some problems later in life. And those ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, have been associated through extensive research with things like lack of physical activity, smoking, alcoholism, drug use, missing work, obesity, diabetes, depression, suicide attempts, increased number of STDs, heart disease, cancer, stroke, COPD, and broken bones. So in other words, the more stressors you tend to be exposed to, particularly as a child, the worse your health outcomes can be as you become an adult and as you get older. Doesn't mean it's exactly predicted, it just means you have a much higher likelihood of those things happening. I'll link below some more information on ACEs if you're interested in reading more about that. All right, I loaded that brush pretty heavy, so I'm going to put still a little bit more water into this lather mixture because it's still pretty thick on the face. Of course, I've got it in on the shirt per usual, but I want to get this lather pretty hydrated because I'm using this Kamasori Shavette. By the way, I told Reed over at Shave Cave, aka the Lather Whipster, that I would try his whip technique in a shave upcoming. I'm not going to do it in this one, but in a shave very soon, Reed. I'm gonna try that out and do it on video. So that's looking pretty shiny. I could go a little more with a little more water, but I've already been talking enough here. We'll see how this does. As far as scent strength on this, I would say off the tub it's about an 8, and upon lathering it's a little lighter, more like a 6 or 7 for me right now, but that may change as I go throughout the shave. But again, this is the Goodfellow Smiles Shibumi Kamasori Shavette, and I've got a pre-cut half derby premium in there. And I tried a Gillette Nasset snapped in half, but when you snap a blade, it leaves the tabs at where it's split sort of bent, and it just didn't work with this particular insert for this Kamasori Shavette, and it needed really more one that was flattened. I have heard of people cutting those with cutting a DE blade with like scissors. I could try that as well, but I decided to use one of the pre-cut ones that I had just to do this shave. So let's go in here with this open blade and see what we can do. Try to make sure I'm getting it on camera here. Now, one of the more shocking things to me about PTSD and CPTSD, which would be the complex post-traumatic stress disorder, is that when I was being trained in my master's program, and for that matter, even in my doctoral program, PTSD was largely just thought to be related to the military and first responders. And actually, as early as 1994, some of the experts in complex PTSD were telling, and actually formally telling as a work group for the American Psychiatric Association, the 4th edition that was coming out of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is sort of the Bible, if you will, for diagnosing mental health issues, that there needed to be a new categorization of type of PTSD. But the APA just felt like that severe, mild, and moderate was enough of a typology to characterize or capture the different types of PTSD. Nonetheless, this is talked about in this book, the book that I just showed you. The work group voted, I think it was like 19-2, to actually have those new categories included, but the powers of the APA overruled them. Now that was like in 1994, 96, mid-90s. And that work group, as he talks about in the book, was shocked when DSM-4 came out without those new categories that were suggested. What's worse is that since that time, in the last decade, more trauma experts and complex PTSD experts and the Veterans Administration recommended again to the APA that complex PTSD be included as sort of a separate category of PTSD. And once again, the APA denied to put it in. But now, leading trauma experts agree that, what this is allowed to happen, both DSM-3 and DSM-4, and I realize I'm getting technical here, is made it difficult to diagnose and treat people correctly. In fact, complex PTSD can mimic depression, anxiety, and something called borderline personality disorder. And people can be treated just for those things, and while it may help their symptoms, ultimately it doesn't help them to get better long term. Now, if you're being treated for depression, anxiety, or BPD, I would not advise you to consider a different course of action without first talking to your doctor and talking to, a therapist or other mental health professional about possibly seeing a trauma specialist. So don't, stop your meds on your own. That's a very dangerous thing to do. And, consider, looking up, and again, I'll link this below, complex PTSD and see if that might be a better explanation for your anxiety or depression. Because, as I mentioned at the top of the video, someone I'm very, very close to was recently diagnosed with complex PTSD. And it sort of shocked me, but then what I realized, it's because I was still thinking under the old model that I was educated under. And because I teach mostly research and policy related to social work, I have not kept up as much with the mental health developments that were not in the DSM, because I just sort of paid attention to what was coming out in the DSM, but I should know that there's sort of politics, so to speak, behind that. Anyway, I know this person well enough that, at one point I thought they'd had anxiety and depression, and then I was actually considering borderline personality disorder as something they might be dealing with, which is a difficult diagnosis because it can be difficult to treat. However, what this complex PTSD sort of constellation of symptoms suggest is that the depression and BPD-like behavior is more attributable to trauma, particularly ongoing trauma that usually starts in childhood, that the individual could not escape from or control. And so their brain basically went into fight or flight mode to help them survive, and they've never really gotten out of that mode. Now, I want to be frank here for a second. There are some of you out there, some of you men, maybe women, who are watching this, and excuse my language, but I can read some of your thoughts because I know I've been around. And some of you saying, people need to quit being little bitches. Excuse me for the gendered reference, but I'm just saying that's how us men talk about men who we may think are not tough enough or need to suck it up. But that's not what this is about. I would encourage you to go over and watch Bill's video at the Wet Shaving Savage. He did a video with this soap this weekend, talked about his experience in combat and what that was like for him and how that trauma affected him. This is not about excusing your behavior or your actions about something that happened in your childhood or something that happened on your job. This is about understanding how we're affected by things. It's not about blaming people. It's about trying to become the best version of you that you can be and to enjoy your life. And if you're not able to function like you want to function, part of the treatment that's actually recommended in this book is not just the talking to a therapist and taking medication, but also challenging yourself, particularly with physical challenges. I'm not going to attempt the fool's pass with this razor. In fact, I'm just going to just go back over it with the grain pass there. So what I'm saying to you is, if you're thinking, oh, somebody went through something as a kid, just get over it. Suck it up, buttercup, as I've heard it said. Are there people who malinger and get just so focused on being miserable? And are those people hard to be around? Sure. But think about how miserable they must be if it makes you miserable to be around them. Which brings up the issue that PTSD doesn't just affect, I've nicked myself up pretty good with this shave head. I thought I probably would. PTSD doesn't just affect those that are directly affected by it, but also their loved ones, people that are around them, their family, their immediate family, their friends, their coworkers. And it's also important to note that some trauma is also secondary trauma, or what we call vicarious trauma, meaning trauma that you either witnessed but you weren't directly the victim of the trauma, or weren't directly physically harmed by the trauma, but you witnessed the trauma. I'm going to just say for a second, part of what I do is I train social workers, and many of them go out and are mental health social workers or child welfare social workers, and guys, they're first responders too. People don't usually characterize them as that, but social workers are often the first on the scene for a mental health crisis or a child welfare crisis, and they can over time experience that trauma vicariously or secondary, meaning they're seeing a lot of trauma or hearing about a lot of trauma. And one study found that about 60% of public child welfare workers had symptoms of PTSD, because as a child welfare worker, and I used to be one, not only did I work in mental health, but I was a public child welfare worker, you hear and see and deal with some horrible things. And so even if that trauma doesn't happen directly to you, just being exposed to it can be really difficult to deal with. All right, so using this shavette is not like using the Rockwell 6S or any of the DEs we've been using lately. I'll talk more about my straight razor and open blade journey in a future shave, because we're already talking too much about stuff in this one, but my face is stinging pretty good from still being pretty novice at using these open blades. But we're going to try to do a little bit of a third pass here. Put a little more water on this. But this is kind of sad, but the reason I'm using the commissary is I could not resist the whole red and black theme. I just had to throw this in there, so that's pretty pathetic when you're trying to match everything up. Oh me, let's see. Let me go this way across. Hitting the usual pickup areas here. I actually need to go this way a little bit. Let me also try this jawline here. Well, it's a challenge to try to talk about these issues in a comprehensive way. It's just not possible within the course of a shave. Sort of checking and feeling here where else we might need to pick up. I mean, I could spend hours talking about this. I have some more resources listed in the description below, so if you want to check those out. Again, I highly recommend that book to you, which I'll also have linked below. Okay, great soap. The scent did open up to about an 8 while shaving as well, if not a 9. It's very strong. I like the scent. Leathers, boozy notes, tobacco, those are right in my wheelhouse. And this was definitely a keeper for me. And again, you can win this one. Win one that's not been used at all, both a splash and a soap. And that is, we're just going to have to be a good enough, a GES, a good enough shave for today using that commissary. But that just means I can, shave probably tomorrow with the DE and get a little closer. But if you'd like to win that set, just comment below I'm in, and I'll be drawing for that soap and splash in a future shave. Again, at Shave 326, who, if you don't know, is a nurse, told us all that. That's an anatomically correct heart, by the way, and you can see the man sort of kneeling there. Again, I gave you an up-close look at that at the beginning. I'll put a link to the artist for that label below, his Etsy page and his Instagram page as well as First Line Shaves, and where you can purchase this razor. After seeing me use it, you probably don't want to, but it's one of my favorite. It's my favorite half DE shavette that I've tried, and I've tried about 3 now. All right, let's rinse this off. We'll come back and try out this splash. Okay, that's my first time using a First Line Shaves soap, and I'm really pleased with its performance. Let's get in here and try the splash. There it is, and get a similar scent, if not an exact scent, off of the splash. Alcohol burn, because I am not yet. I'm still very much a novice using an open blade like that. So a lot of scraped and irritated skin, but man, that scent is great. It's really, this one's in my wheelhouse, and definitely a keeper, as I said before. And the splash is pretty much spot on with the scent of the soap. It's stronger, as you might expect. I might even put it up there close to like 9.5 or 10 on the scent strength scale. Okay shave in terms of my skill level. Great shave in terms of the soap and the splash, particularly the scent and performance of both. If you're interested, I've also put a link to National Public Radio's quiz on ACEs, to take a quiz and see how many maybe ACEs that you went through as a kid. That's important to know. You can read the article that goes with it as well. If you are in need of help, talk to your doctor, talk to a mental health professional, talk to a friend about getting help. But regardless, reach out and get some help and some assistance. And let me just end by saying this. It's heartbreaking when I consider the number of people over the past 2 decades, 2.5 decades, who have been misdiagnosed with depression or anxiety or borderline personality disorder as their primary diagnosis, when they probably were dealing with complex PTSD. And I think that the world is really changing and starting to see how to treat people through a trauma model, and that's important for us all to become more aware of. I just want to applaud Michael at First Line Shaves for bringing up this issue, for putting a soap out there, and particularly as a first responder. First of all, Michael, thank you for your service, continued service, because he's currently a first responder. But also to point out in the soap description and in the materials that they put out, that this is not just about PTSD in first responders and veterans and active duty military, but also just in individuals who are not military or LEO or first responders. And so I really appreciate that for Michael, you doing that and recognizing that. Please ask any questions you'd like to below about shave or about this topic of PTSD and CPTSD, complex PTSD. And I really just value you guys and gals as viewers. It means a lot to me that I've reached 500 subscribers, so I'm excited to give away this soap and splash set. And as always, thanks for watching, thanks for liking, commenting, subscribing, and thanks for in general for tuning in and all your support. So until next time, take care, man.
Take a load off Fanny. Take a load for free. Take a